Scene 1. Escape to the outside. The cold night air hit Lucy like a wall as she stumbled out of the asylum. Her heart was still racing, and her legs felt weak beneath her. She paused to catch her breath, but something didn't feel right. The air was too still, too silent, as if the world had stopped moving.
No, it can't be over. I can't still be there, can I?
Her breath came in ragged gasps as she looked around, trying to orient herself. She was on the overgrown path that led away from the asylum, the trees surrounding her, looming like dark figures in the night. Suddenly, she heard it, a faint whisper in the wind. It was soft at first, almost like a distant echo, but it grew louder, more insistent.
Lucy. Lucy.
Lucy froze. Her eyes widened as she scanned the area, but there was nothing. No one. Just shadows. But the voice, it sounded like it was coming from inside her own head.
Who's there?
He whispering stopped. For a moment, there was silence again. But then, without warning, a gust of wind blew through the trees, and she felt it, a presence, cold and suffocating, pressing down on her.
You can't leave, Lucy. You belong here.
Lucy screamed and took off running, her feet pounding against the earth as she tried to escape. But no matter how fast she ran, the whispering followed her, chasing her through the darkness. Scene 2. The Whispering Shadows. Lucy's feet pounded against the earth as she ran deeper into the forest. Her breath came in short gasps, and her heart was racing. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches like twisted arms reaching out to grab her.
I have to get away. I have to.
She could still hear the faint whispers behind her, growing louder with each passing second. It was as if the shadows themselves were calling to her, beckoning her back to the asylum. The cold seemed to seep into her bones, making it harder and harder to move.
Lucy. Lucy.
Suddenly, the ground beneath her gave way. Lucy stumbled and fell, landing hard on the forest floor. Dirt and leaves clung to her as she scrambled to her feet, her hands trembling. She looked back, and for a split second, she saw them, shadowy figures, barely visible in the darkness, creeping toward her.
No, this can't be real.
Her voice was barely a whisper as she pushed herself up and started running again. But no matter how fast she moved, the shadows seemed to close in around her, their whispers becoming almost deafening.
You belong to us. You can't escape.
Lucy's legs felt like they were made of lead. Her vision blurred as exhaustion set in, but the terror kept her going. She knew that if she stopped, it would all be over. Scene 3. The escape is impossible. Lucy's lungs burned with each breath as she forced herself forward. The whispers, once faint and distant, now seemed to surround her, filling the air like an invisible fog. Her legs were heavy, and every step felt slower than the last, as if the very ground was holding her back.
I have to get out. I have to.
Her voice cracked as she stumbled once more, her knees scraping against the rough earth. She tried to pull herself up, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. The shadowy figures were now closer than ever, their forms more distinct, long, dark, and faceless, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally as they reached toward her.
You can't run, Lucy. You never could.
Lucy's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she considered giving up. The weight of the fear, the relentless pursuit, it was too much. But then, from the corner of her eye, she spotted something, a faint light, barely visible through the twisted trees ahead. Hope flickered in her chest.
There's a way out. I can make it.
She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain in her legs, and ran toward the light with every ounce of strength she had left. But the closer she got, the more distant the light seemed, as if the forest itself was stretching the space between her and her escape.
It's not real, Lucy. You'll never leave.
Her breath came in short, desperate gasps as the trees seemed to close in on her, the branches scraping against her arms and legs like claws. She could hear the whispering growing louder, more insistent.
No! I'm not trapped. I'm not.
Scene 4, the light fades. Lucy's legs ached as she pushed forward, but the faint light that had once been her beacon of hope now seemed to flicker, dimming with every step. The forest around her felt alive, the trees twisted and bent in unnatural ways, as if they were conspiring to trap her.
No, no. I'm almost there.
Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, as the shadows behind her closed in. The figures were now fully formed, tall and looming, their presence suffocating. Their whispers were no longer distant, they were right behind her, crawling under her skin.
Lucy, come back. You belong with us.
The light flickered again, barely a spark now. Lucy's heart raced as she realized the truth. The light was fading, and with it, her last hope.
No, it can't end like this. It can't.
She reached out toward the fading light, but the closer she got, the more distant it seemed. The ground beneath her felt soft, like quicksand, pulling her down. She struggled, clawing at the earth, but it was no use. The shadows were upon her now, their cold presence wrapping around her like chains. She could feel their icy breath on her neck, hear their whispers in her ear.
You'll never leave, Lucy. Never.
Lucy's scream echoed through the forest, but there was no one to hear it. The light disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. Scene 5, a voice from the dark. Lucy collapsed to the ground, her fingers digging into the soft, sinking earth. The light was gone. All that remained was darkness. The cold breath of the shadowy figures brushed against the back of her neck, sending chills through her entire body.
No! No! Please!
Her voice trembled, barely audible, as the darkness wrapped itself around her like a shroud. The whispers grew louder, now surrounding her completely.
You belong here, Lucy, forever.
Suddenly, a new voice pierced through the shadows. It was soft but clear, and it didn't sound like the others. It was familiar.
Lucy, don't give up. You can still escape.
Lucy's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked around, but there was no one there, just the shadows, swirling around her. Was it all in her head?
Who are you? Where are you?
The voice didn't answer directly, but its presence seemed to push back the darkness, if only slightly.
Get up, Lucy. You have to keep going. Don't let them win.
With newfound determination, Lucy forced herself to her feet. Her legs wobbled, and her body was weak, but the voice gave her strength. She had to keep moving. She had to escape. But the shadows didn't retreat. They loomed closer, more aggressive than ever.
You can't run from us. You'll never be free.
Lucy took a deep breath, pushing away the fear, and ran. This time, she wasn't running blindly, she was running toward the voice, the one thing that might save her. Scene 6, the chase begins again. Lucy stumbled forward, her legs still weak, but the mysterious voice gave her strength. The shadows, however, were relentless. They moved closer, their whispers turning into a low, guttural growl. She could feel the air thickening, making it harder to breathe.
You can't escape us, Lucy. We're everywhere.
Her heart pounded in her chest as the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift and twist. Every step felt like she was being pulled back into the darkness, but she pushed forward, refusing to give in.
I won't let you take me.
She forced herself to run, her feet barely leaving the ground. The cold wind whipped against her face, and the trees around her blurred as she moved. But no matter how fast she ran, the shadows were faster.
Keep moving, Lucy. Don't stop. You're almost there.
Lucy's breath came in short, desperate gasps. Her legs were burning, and her vision blurred from the cold and exhaustion. The shadows were closing in again, their dark forms almost touching her. She could hear the sound of their movement, like claws scraping against the ground.
I can't. They're too fast.
Suddenly, she felt something, an invisible force, almost like a hand, pushing her forward. The mysterious voice spoke again, stronger this time.
Run, Lucy! Don't look back!
Without thinking, she obeyed. She ran faster than she thought possible, her legs moving on their own. The ground seemed to level out, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she saw something ahead, a clearing. There was light. Scene 7, the clearing. Lucy's heart raced as she pushed forward, her body on the verge of collapse. The clearing was so close now, the faint light ahead beckoning her. But the shadows weren't far behind. She could hear them, their movements growing louder, the whispering turning into snarls.
I can make it.
Her legs burned with each step, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She could feel the presence of the shadows right behind her, reaching out to drag her back into the darkness.
Lucy, you can't escape. It's too late.
She stumbled into the clearing, her knees hitting the ground hard. The light was brighter here, but it flickered, casting long shadows across the open space. Lucy looked around frantically, searching for a way out.
Where do I go now?
The mysterious voice echoed again, calm but urgent.
Get up, Lucy. The path is just ahead.
I have to keep going.
She forced her body to move, her feet dragging as she stumbled toward the path. The shadows howled behind her, their presence stronger than ever.
You won't make it. We'll catch you.
Lucy ignored the voices, pushing herself forward. The clearing seemed to stretch endlessly, but the path was her only hope. She couldn't stop now. Scene 8, the narrow path. Lucy staggered forward, her vision blurring as she forced herself toward the narrow path ahead. The trees loomed on either side of her, their twisted branches forming a tunnel of shadows. The flickering light from the clearing behind her barely illuminated the path, casting eerie shadows that danced along the ground.
I have to keep going, just a little farther.
Her breath was ragged, each step more painful than the last. The shadows behind her were closing in, their whispers turning into growls. She could feel their presence, cold and suffocating, just a few feet behind.
Lucy, stop fighting. It's over.
Lucy clenched her fists, pushing away the fear that gripped her heart. The path was narrow and treacherous, but it was her only hope. She had to keep moving, even though her legs felt like they were made of lead. Suddenly, the ground beneath her shifted. The earth gave way, crumbling beneath her feet. She gasped, stumbling forward and nearly falling into the darkness below.
No, no.
Her hands reached out, grabbing onto the roots of a nearby tree. She dangled over the edge, her legs kicking frantically as she tried to pull herself back onto the path. The shadowy figures loomed closer, their cold breath brushing against her skin.
You can't escape us, Lucy. You're ours.
Lucy's fingers slipped on the dirt, her grip weakening. Her heart raced as she struggled to hold on. But then, just as she was about to fall, the mysterious voice spoke again, stronger this time.
Hold on, Lucy. You can do this. Don't let go.
With a surge of strength, Lucy pulled herself back onto the narrow path, her body shaking with exhaustion. She looked ahead, the darkness stretching endlessly before her, but she couldn't stop. She had to keep going. Scene 9, the final descent. Lucy's legs trembled as she pulled herself back onto the narrow path. Her hands were shaking, covered in dirt, and her heart pounded wildly in her chest. The shadows behind her were closer than ever, their presence overwhelming.
I can't. I'm so close.
Her body was on the verge of collapse, but the path was still ahead. She could see it narrowing even further, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. The cold wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it the sound of the shadowy figure's growls.
You're too weak, Lucy. It's over.
Lucy stumbled forward, her vision blurring as tears filled her eyes. The ground beneath her felt unstable, like it was ready to give way at any moment. But she couldn't stop. She was almost there.
Don't give up, Lucy. Just a few more steps.
Her breath came in short, desperate gasps as she forced her legs to move. The path was steep now, sloping downward into what seemed like endless darkness. The shadows behind her reached out, their whispers turning into screams.
I have to keep going.
Suddenly, the ground beneath her crumbled again. Lucy screamed as she lost her footing, tumbling down the steep slope. She reached out, grasping at the dirt and rocks, but her hands slipped. The world spun around her as she fell, the shadows closing in from every side.
You're ours now, Lucy. Forever.
Lucy hit the ground hard, her body skidding across the dirt. She lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, her vision fading in and out. The shadows loomed over her, their cold presence suffocating.
Get up! Lucy, you have to get up!
With a surge of willpower, Lucy forced herself to move. Her hands dug into the dirt as she pushed herself up onto her knees. She was so close to giving up, but the voice, it gave her strength. The escape. Or is it? Lucy's legs felt like lead as she pushed forward, her entire body trembling with exhaustion. The light ahead grew brighter, illuminating the path just enough to guide her, but the shadows were still behind her, relentless. Their whispers turned into low, guttural growls, filling the air with a suffocating presence.
You can't escape, Lucy. We are always with you.
Lucy gasped, her breath ragged as she stumbled forward. She could see the end of the path now, a bright clearing just a few steps away. The light was warm, inviting, but it flickered as if it could disappear at any moment.
I'm almost there. I can make it.
She reached out, her fingers trembling as she stepped into the light. For a moment, everything went silent. The shadows behind her faded, the whispers stopped. Lucy took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she looked around. She was standing in an open field, bathed in the soft glow of sunlight. The sky was clear, and the air was warm. It felt safe. She smiled, her body relaxing for the first time since her escape.
I did it. I'm free.
But as she took a step forward, something cold ran down her spine. The warmth of the light began to fade, and the field around her grew dim. She looked down at her hands. Dirt still clung to her skin, just as it had in the forest. The air around her felt heavy, suffocating.
We're always with you, Lucy. You'll never be free.
Her heart raced as she turned, her eyes scanning the horizon. And there, at the edge of the field, she saw them, dark figures, standing motionless, watching her. The shadows hadn't disappeared. They had followed her. Lucy's breath caught in her throat as she backed away, her legs shaking. The light dimmed further, and the shadows seemed to creep closer, despite not moving.
No, no, this can't be.
Lucy stood in the field, feeling the warmth of the light fade around her. The shadows loomed at the edges of her vision, growing darker with every second. She looked around, her breath catching in her throat. The escape had been an illusion. The shadows were still there, always with her. No matter how far she ran, she would never truly be free.
Forever, Lucy, forever.